Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, on Friday night, the former Universities Minister, Sam Gina, became the latest member of the government to quit and subsequently backed a second referendum, which may be music to the ears of our next guest, the campaigner, Gina Miller. Thank you very much for being on the show with us. Now, before we get to the talk about second referendums, I'm keen to get your thoughts on the interview that we've just heard. Nick Bowles, he's proposing Norway Plus, if you like, staying in the single market. Is that something that you'd support?
I think anything is better than actually this withdrawal agreement we've got, which is just giving away sovereignty, giving away everything. It is the worst possible deal. I don't know how it took this long to get here. But the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's Norway plus a plan B. The reality of where we are is that any option will require an extension to Article 50. We don't have the time because in Nick's suggestion of Norway Plus, you'd have to negotiate with the members of EFTA, you'd have to go and look at the protocols in the EEA. It's not just going to be something we can take off the shelf. And we don't have the practical time to do that with the 29th of March looming.
And I guess it's the same for Labour. I mean, we've heard from Sir Keir Starmer there talking about a general election.
Yeah, I mean, whatever the options are right now, the reality is what counts. And the reality is this vote is not going to get through Parliament in 9 days' time. You know, the Prime Minister, what is Plan B? Is it an election that she calls herself? Is it an election that the Labour Party wants to call a vote of no confidence? Is it an alternative? Is it sending her back? Whatever the alternatives are, other than no deal, would require an extension. And this idea that there is a no majority in Parliament for no deal, I must just point out that if there is no other option, because of the MPs allowing Article 50 to be triggered, no deal is the legal end game here. So this idea that it won't happen.
Stop it.
So they can't stop it because what they should have done is all these wranglings and everything that's going on now. When I won my case, this is when those debates should have been happening. Because too many MPs, because so many of them, triggered Article 50 without really thinking about the consequences of that. The actual legal end game of that trigger is no deal if there's no other option.
I'm interested in your thoughts about the second referendum. There's been more and more talk about the possibility of having another Brexit vote. Surely that would be a gift to the far right.
I don't think it would be. And the reason I say that is because you have to, if you just clear away the bluster and the noise and this whole idea of the will of the people 2 years ago, look at what people are saying now. And the polls, plus travelling around the country that I've been doing for months and months and months, people are saying, we actually do want to say, we do want to find out what's going on, we do want to, now we know more. And this is not about leave or remain or anything like that. You know, it's 73% of the Labour Party membership, it's 112 Labour constituency, it's a 67 Conservative party who are on the sort of, you know, on the border of their seats. You know, there's so much here where people are saying we want to have a say on this and decide what happens in the future. And the other thing to point out in this is if we're now pushing for a general election from both parties, that is a waste, in my view, to go back to the people, because an election should be about your full manifesto and your policies for all sectors of society, not to be just dominated by one issue.
You're talking there about the conversations that you've been having around the country. And as you know, on the show, we try and get out and about as well and talk to people. And I have to say, I do think there is a large number of people in the UK who would feel utterly betrayed if there was a second referendum. And the worst thing, perhaps, is I don't think they would even feel that surprised. It's almost as if they expect it to happen.
But I think that is resolved by what's on the
establishment to
effectively
override their decision.
In my opinion, that it wouldn't be, because it would be what's on the ballot paper. And whilst it's the MPs and Parliament will have to decide that, the Electoral Commission, if we got to that stage, which I think we will get to, and we're edging towards it as being the only plausible way out of this mess, this political mess, then I think actually no deal would have to be on the ballot. I think we would have to be fair to everyone. And that's why I believe it would have to be all three options, because we couldn't have a situation where people felt that they voted leave and they weren't listened to. We have to respect that vote.
Just finally, you, a successful businesswoman, you've decided to kind of stick your neck above the parapet, if you like, on Brexit. You get some pretty vicious abuse on social media and elsewhere. I mean, I've seen it, even announcing that you were on the show. How How does that make you feel? Why do you go through all this?
I've been a campaigner for nearly 20, 30 years now, and I've always felt that people have the right to be spoken to honestly and to be given information in a way they can understand to make an informed choice. And that's what I'm campaigning for. I think process matters, honesty to people matters, and people having the information. You know, I've even gone to the extent of launching a new campaign in September, which is sort of called End the Chaos, because I thought this is where we'd be. And our remit is to try and answer people's questions. They're not being spoken to in a way that can give them an informed choice and help them understand where they are. And surely that's what we should all be doing. And I'm going to carry on fighting for that. I'm going to carry on fighting for people to have the right to understand what's going on.
OK, Gina Miller, thank you very much.
Apart from being a cookery icon for 5 decades, Delia Smith has been back in the public eye recently campaigning for a further referendum on our EU membership, something that seems increasingly possible. She came into the studio earlier this week and I asked her to think back to how she felt on that day in 2016 when the country voted to leave the EU. Did she think then there would have to be a rerun of the vote?
Well, no, I was just absolutely devastated. And I just said to my husband, what's going to happen now? And he said one word. He only said one word: chaos. And that's what's happened. He was right.
I suppose what I'm asking is, did you ever accept the result of the referendum?
No.
So you always thought we're going to have to go back and fight this again?
Well, no, I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm like everybody else, you know, nobody knows anything. So what can you know? But no, I just was absolutely devastated. And I've got to confess to you that, you know, I'm quite a deep thinker. I think a lot and reflect a lot. And everything within me screams out, this is wrong.
You live in Suffolk, which I think every single part of Suffolk voted to leave. It was one of the most leave-y bits of the entire country.
Yeah.
You must talk to people around you a lot. Do you think it's possible that they're right and you're wrong?
I have tried honestly to see the other side, but you know, I've got lots of reasons, and let's just stick to the referendum now for a minute. The referendum was called on a whim. It was about, you know, the Eurosceptics shutting them up in the Tory party. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody had thought about it. Just call a referendum.
One of the other arguments people make about that referendum is that your side, the Remain side, talked endlessly about economics and numbers and money, and the other side talked about identity and passion and belief. In order to avoid the same result in another referendum, how do you think the Remain argument is going to have to change the way it presents itself?
Well, I think, you know, it's got to represent itself by saying, hell's bells, we've had 45 years of quite peaceful, calm living. You know, don't we all want to go back to that? Why do we want all this? It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years. Why does our country want all this when what was before was so much better?
Now, you've been a big advocate for what's called the People's Vote, or the second referendum, or the other referendum.
Indeed.
And you've marched and you've spoken and all the rest of it. What do you think the question should be?
In or out?
Straight forward, in or out. So put Theresa May's deal to bed and then...
Don't mess with it, just in or out.
But that was what we had last time.
Yes, but we didn't know anything last time, and this time, my God, do we know? Chaos.
If you get another referendum, there might be the same result. Do you agree with Tony Blair that that would be that? You'd have to accept that was what the country wanted to do. That would be over.
We have to absolutely... That would be more democratic, because at least people know that they've got 20 years of chaos ahead of them. Right. You know, so therefore they do know what they're voting for.
So there's clearly a lot of passion here. We know you're passionate about cooking. We know you're passionate about football. Why are you so driven by this cause?
I think it's quite obvious. It's right in front of our eyes that the whole world, if we're going to live in peace, has got to learn how to cooperate. Countries have got to learn how to cooperate with one another. And I think this is coming to the fore now, because in the last century we had a huge shock, because we had this devastating 2 world wars, the explosion of the atomic bomb. But we discovered something when that happened. What we discovered was that humanity, the spirit of humanity, under those pressures comes together. And when it comes together, it becomes really strong. And we were able, by that, to drive out, you know, the egotistical, isolationist regime that we were fighting against. Suddenly, the United Nations is formed. Then, a bit later, the European countries, devastated by the world wars, decided to try and work together in peaceful cooperation in order to stop anything like that happening again.
I suppose a thoughtful, reflective Leave voter might say, well, actually, what we were fighting for was democracy and our own independent democracy. And the point is that if we get that democracy back completely independently, we can still have good relations with other countries, we can still hold out hands to other countries, we can be as pro-European as ever, but just not part of the political system.
Yes, I can see that argument, but I still see the bigger picture is that if we're going to have peace in the world, we've got to learn to work together.
There's going to be a lot of chaos in a lot of kitchens up and down the country in the next couple of weeks as people confront the bureaucratic and administrative horror of Christmas Day. What's your advice? Do you have any particular tip for them this year?
Well, no particular tip this year, but I do have the plan. You know, I have the sort of last 36 hours plan, which is online. And if they follow that, think of me because I have to follow it. You know, I'm old now, I can't remember everything. So if you follow the plan, it says do this now, do this now, do this now. And millions of people have written to me and said it works.
Delia Smith, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.